Hello everyone, this is the New Low News Show reporting to you live, semi-live, recorded, totally not live, from the degenerated workers' state of Maryland. I am MC Graham, and to my left...
I'm King Kobe. Adam, unfortunately, cannot be with us. He has a prior engagement.
Yep.
He plans to get drunk.
And he just said he couldn't swing it, which is understandable. Of course. And so tonight we're just going to try to run through a few stories which have been picking away at us, eating away at our will to live. And
So that's why we do this show. Like, you know when you read something and it just pisses you off so badly, that can't be the end of the situation. You know, like you can't just move on. Like you try to just watch some porn, listen to some music, whatever you're into, and it's just not taking. You know, like that shit is just still milling around in your head. That's the kind of shit we have to just get out.
Right, it just builds up over the course of the week, and then you're like, I've reached the end, the breaking point, and I need to say something mean, uncharitable about the people who did this to me so that I can sort of feel, back to baseline again.
We're not conservatives,
right?
At least in the orthodox sense of the term. I'm not a Republican. I hate war, hate capitalism. So in a lot of ways, I'm like a radical, right? Or we're, I can't speak for Graham, but he's at least an anti-capitalist or critical of such an institution.
I'm just a bitter nihilist.
Just a hater, right? So I'm not sure what I am anymore, but I know that I'm not a fucking cultural Marxist. And Graham actually explained this terminology to me. I thought cultural Marxism was sort of conservatives misunderstanding sort of liberal ideals and then just sort of smearing it with a quick, if you say Marxist, people it just drives the emotions up.
Right.
So can you explain like what cultural Marxism really is or what it means?
I guess the idea, from what I understand, you can criticize culture, the oppressive structures of a culture, using the basic sort of motivating factors that drove the original Marxist criticism, which was mostly centered on so you have labor, you have the toiling masses of workers, and then you had the very few who enjoyed lives of luxury on the backs of the exploited profits and stuff like that. So that was like kind of the basic sort of class criticism, right?
It was an economic argument.
Yeah, it was mostly an economic argument. And the argument was that once you instituted socialism and later communism, a lot of the negative characteristics associated with the old world, such as war, starvation, poverty, educational ignorance, all that stuff would go away because you'd just be living in a more fair society. So we have that sort of a standard Marxism, and then after this we have, we can also take this and we can apply this to culture as a whole, so how do class dynamics affect culture, and then we can also look at other oppressive structures, so like racism or sexism or any other ism.
But now we're looking at oppression more generally.
Right.
Not just economic oppression.
Right, you're looking at so the whole economic argument is surprisingly absent from all of these sort of critiques, and it's telling because I think the original Marxists, they would say that things like racism and sexism and stuff like that, they exist, but if you don't change the underlying economic structure, you're not gonna do much that matters, in the long term.
And that's what sort of strikes me. Like I'm guessing I wouldn't have as much of a problem with these sort of cultural Marxists and their ideas if we had already sort of achieved an opulent lifestyle for workers.
Right.
We're far from that. And not that I believe in sort of the optimism of sort of the Marxists of last century necessarily.
Right.
But we haven't even gotten close. Like it's not like we got there and then we can start talking about these things. It's like their Marxism, their state socialism failed, and then we're in this like just odd situation where, like you said, the humanities are taken over by the sort of cultural Marxist bullshit, and meanwhile economically we're all fucked.
Yeah, we're backsliding hardcore.
Right.
You know, like in the last 40 years, I mean, wages peaked 1970 something, early 70s. They've been stagnant or declining in a lot of sectors.
Rapidly declining since the recession. So we're staying at home. We're not going out because we can't afford it. We're posting GIFs on Tumblr about patriarchy, consumerism, and heteronormativity. So
I guess is what you're saying, that your problem with a lot of these radical academics, is that they don't address the essential question, which is, where is your $50,000 a year?
$50,000 a year.
Yeah.
I'd just like to say that again.
Yeah.
None of this would be a fucking issue if every individual in every country earned the equivalent of $50,000 a year.
Yeah.
Just imagine, I make probably $19,000 a year.
I make less than that.
Graham is unemployed. Yeah. He would kill a man for $50,000 a year.
I would reach the level of political seriousness just for that sweet $50,000 a year.
If you could be absolutely sure that you would get $50,000 a year, you would pick up a gun and fight for it.
Yeah.
And yet nobody can promise you that. Nobody is striving for that.
And no one's even pretending to promise that for you anymore.
I need something to change your mind. I need something to change your mind.
So this comes from two academics, Nora Timmerman and Julia Ostertag, who took issue with the way animals were portrayed in children's books, songs, and on clothing. And they said that these stories send the message that animals only exist for human use, that humans are better than animals, that animals don't have their own stories to tell, that it's fine to demean them by cooing over their cuteness, and perhaps worst of all, they say animals are anthropomorphized to reinforce quote-unquote socially dominant norms, like nuclear families and gender stereotypes. And I quote, "Much of young children's media reproduces and confirms racist, colonial, consumerist, heteronormative, and patriarchal norms."
Jesus.
And I'm trying to think, what would media that doesn't do this look like? How do you go, okay, one, are those norms even present? That's questionable. And two, if you went through and rooted them all out, okay, so for example, if saying that an animal is cute demeans it, then how could you even look at animals?
You can just look at let's say a chipmunk, or I just saw something the other day, a hedgehoglet, which is a baby hedgehog.
Yeah, which are
literally clinging to a man's finger.
Yeah.
Or a woman, I don't know, or I don't know who it was clinging to. Yeah. Just a creature,
person, an entity.
And I went, in my black heart went daw.
Yeah.
Right? And how would I not just? That's a fantastic, regal looking animal.
Right.
I'm not going to demean it by
making it cooing. Yeah. Well, and here's some people have speculated that baby mammals in particular look quote unquote cute by design, because if they didn't create that awe sort of sensation, their parents would leave them to the elements, because baby mammals are such a drag to take care of.
Like humans, for example, and we're animals, by the way. Our offspring have a very long period before they can actually fend for themselves, and they've actually noticed that the proportions of a cat's face are so similar to a human baby's, and that probably had something to do with the domestication of cats.
Yeah.
Although these people who wrote this passage would probably say the domestication of cats in and of itself was a speciesist, colonialist, racist,
heteronormative, whatever else,
patriarchal, whatever it is, and that gets back to what you were saying about not even knowing what battle you're fighting anymore, right?
Well, and it's and I think what it boils down to is it says it reinforces the dominant social norms. So there are two problems I think that a lot of people writing in this sort of milieu run into. One is the idea that norms, which are most likely the result of nature, are just the random walk of cultural
social
force.
construct.
Yeah. So, for example, we have the finding a small animal cute. I believe that is most likely biologically pre-programmed. And if this is oppressive, which it isn't, but if it was, even if it was dangerously oppressive, it's like this is the way people are wired, and to a
Right.
certain extent, you just have to learn to live with it. And the second problem I think they have is just the existence of norms. The idea that there are external standards that people can use to say, hey, you are just not shaping up the way you could. And why do people not like norms? But because it feels like you're having someone else's will imposed upon yourself, right?
Right.
So, for example, in a society where, like, let's say being left-handed, which I am, was considered a mark of demonic sort of heritage. Well,
It makes me a little uneasy right now.
and it should,
right.
it should, because left-handedness evolved as a lethal defense mechanism against the right-handed oppressors. But the thing is like, I could characterize this norm as, intruding into my life and making me feel bad about myself, and that's true to a certain extent. But when you keep looking everywhere you look, any type of norm,
Well, because when you write left-handed, right, your hands go across the letters and might smear them a bit.
right? Well, or I die earlier. They don't know why left-handed people do. They just can't exist effectively in a
Right,
right.
so you're being oppressed.
Right, but that's the thing. Any norm, even one as silly as left-handed versus right-handed, can take on an oppressive characteristic. So at a certain point, you can maybe just say,
And it would seem silly if you added into her list, you saw handedness as part of the oppression, you would say that's fucking ridiculous. Yet all these other terms have gained some sort of era of respectability.
yeah.
Can we just go through them one by one, maybe?
Okay, so we have Colonial, Consumerist.
Okay, I have to stop you right there.
Okay.
Okay. Are there colonies anymore? Like, is anyone colonizing anybody?
Not direct. There are still some colonies that exist. Not many. Not as many as there were 70 years ago.
They're mostly like resorts,
Right. Yeah. No. Mostly, and a lot of the time, the people vote and they just want to stay, like,
As a colony,
because
because they get the sweet benefits.
right. Yeah. There's one French colony. I can't remember its name, but it's mostly a resort island, and they voted, and they all wanted to stay in because they get to stay on the euro. They get the good, nice French health insurance, healthcare
I would
system.
love to have that. I would love to be a colony of France.
Yeah. Oh
myself.
man, my life would
Just this apartment.
Yeah. and so they were like, and then they kind of weighed that against what would most likely happen with self-rule, and they would lose all those nice things that being a French colony sort of entails. So they were like, we'll stick with it for a while, see what happens.
What was after Colonialist?
After Colonial, we had Consumerist, and now
Okay.
this is actually the point where I think there might be some agreement between maybe myself and the authors, because consumerism is incredibly tacky.
Yeah, it's stupid and it's sort of distasteful to me. I mean, I'm not a consumerist. I buy all my clothes. I probably don't spend more than $50 a year on clothes, honestly. That's including shoes and the more expensive items. I don't wear jewelry. I don't care about things beyond their capabilities. So I don't really get into the bling of it all. But I mean, what they're talking about is depictions of animals on clothing. And it's like, that in and of itself is... It's a product. Like, what? So you're offended by that? Then the only way to get rid of the consumerist objection to it would be that shouldn't even exist. Like, there should never be a depiction of an animal, because that would be entertainment and that would drive consumerism, right?
Yeah.
Unless it was entertainment just for its own revolutionary goals that had no if nobody was making any money off it. I don't know.
And finally, we had heteronormative and patriarchal. Okay.
Jesus.
So these last two words are
I want to talk about the word normal, right? Or normative.
okay.
All right. If a majority of the population of humans, animals, etc., do something, it is normal. It doesn't mean it's right. It doesn't mean other ways are wrong. That's just what happens. It's normal, right? Like the way I'm talking to you now, Graham,
Okay.
with my penis inside of my pants. That's normal, right? If my wang was hanging out, that would be not normal, right? You could say that I was not being like wang normative or something, and I would have to correct you. But anyway, so heteronormative. It's like, it doesn't mean that I hate gay people, but it's normal to be heterosexual. Just most, like, yes, animals practice homosexuality, it's true, but most of them practice, for the most part, heterosexuality, and that's why they get to have more of them.
Well, and that's kind of going back to what I was talking about earlier with these sort of ideas or tendencies which are biologically predetermined. The problem is that nature itself is a reactionary force, you know? Like, all of our nice feelings about the world, all of our morality, that does not hold a fucking... that doesn't stand a chance against the fucking meat grinder that this planet is, you know? Like, what would happen in Baltimore if you'd shut off all the water, just as an experiment? We would, all the magical things we think about the brotherhood of man would deteriorate into...
What's what they say, whiskey's for drinking, water's for fighting.
Yep, and so I think a lot of these disputes are really the result of a certain level of material comfort, which I guess is the whole point of modernity to begin with, but it's sort of like...
So you think maybe I wouldn't say we've reached an apex,
right,
but we're at a point where we have the basic necessities taken care of. You got your glowing screens,
right,
you got your clean water right out the tap,
yeah,
you got your Sprite Zero, you got your... whatever you're into, you got your consumerism,
right,
you got your t-shirts with depictions of animals on them or whatever that make you, giggle or go doll. And then, where do you go from there?
Drugs won't change you. Religion won't change you. What's the matter with you?
Part of the problem, I think, with modernity and freedom of choice and stuff like that is that when we get a certain ways along, you just run out of steam. To a certain extent, people have a stronger passion for life if nature is actively trying to kill them than if they are mostly sated. You know, Arthur Schopenhauer, as a German philosopher, said that life mostly oscillates between pain and boredom, right? So you are either in pain.
So true.
Yeah, you're either in physical fucking pain, at which point the only thing you think about is how to get out of pain. And then once you take care of all of that, you're just bored. You wait for the pain to come back. You know why? Because this is not a happy planet. You know, this is a mean killing field. You know, and so to a certain extent, I guess a lot of these conversations strike me as incredibly trivial. You know,
oh, absolutely.
Everything seems to be happening this time.
Especially because I do think pretty green. You know, not in the owning pets is patriarchal, but in the more like...
Well, Graham, are you saying that animals exist only for our use?
No. No, I'm not.
But some animals exist for our use.
I will say that if you decide to use an animal, there isn't like a fucking dude in the sky who's going to jump down and slap you away. That
Right.
it's
Or
largely...
some, like, Canadian PhD candidate.
Right. Yeah, well, they're certainly not going to slap anyone away. And that's, are we using the planet in a sustainable way? Is there going to be a future for humanity? You know,
Right, so more like a pragmatic kind of outlook.
Yeah, it's kind of like...
Whereas these people seem to be more interested... What they were working on involved environmentalism, right? And they're concerned about like how cartoon animals look. How can you not see that that's a terrible use of your time? I mean, you could look at actual wildlife deforestation or actual global climate change or
the pipelines that are getting built.
Yes, serious like
fracking, any of that stuff.
And you could fucking put your life and sort of intellect on the line for it, or you could just fucking whine about how the depiction in Lion King was patriarchal, for example.
Exactly, and that's why I think at the end of the day, there is a trend, especially in the humanities, to present themselves as radicals, right? And I can tell you this from personal experience, there is no cushier life than being a tenured academic. It is literally, you sit the fuck around, you teach 4 classes a week, 5 classes a week, you spend time going to conferences, you type papers. All this is very useful shit, by the way. We enjoy a lot of benefits to our life because people can live these cushy existences, but the idea that they're fighting any serious moral battles in academia, I just don't think it's happening. Like, very few people are getting their moral instructions from these researchers. Policy can be affected by researchers and stuff like that. But, the people who are out there protesting the pipelines, chaining themselves to stuff, like blowing up SUV dealerships and stuff like that, they're not doing that because someone wrote a fucking book about how the Berenstein Bears are like capitalist patriarchal exploitation. They're doing it just because it moves them to some extent. Maybe a lot of it has to do with the fact that, like, old style socialism is so passe. Like,
like worker state socialism.
Yeah, like they tried it.
I actually have a modicum of respect for those guys, because
they put their lives on the line. They were serious people. Like, that's Carl Schmitt. Who's been mentioned on the show before. He was a Nazi jurist and philosopher, and kept writing long after the Reich disintegrated. He said that politics were defined essentially by their seriousness. So, are you willing to pick up a gun and fucking shoot someone directly in the head over your beliefs? If you're not, then what you're doing is, in politics, you're fucking whistle-dicking, you're faffing. He didn't use he probably used some lengthy German term for that essential condition. So, and that's why I think we have respect for the eco-anarchists, because say what you will, they are putting themselves on the line. They're going out there, they're trying to smash stuff pretty directly, whereas the eco-academics are more like whistle-dicking. If no one listens to them for 1,000 years, it will not have made a difference.
Science won't change you. Looks like I can't change you.
Although, it is, like, I will say this, like, a lot of those words we were talking about earlier, like heteronormative, heteronormative is probably, like, the silliest of all the words. Not because it's necessarily a silly concept, but just the way it sounds. Appear on places like Tumblr, as part of the whole social justice internet milieu. And, and it's interesting to me because as, like, a 4chanian, resident 4chan user, I noticed that there is a serious reciprocal relationship between the airheaded progressivism that you see in such places like Tumblr and the trolls of the world. Because if you didn't have these people, who could you insult? If people genuinely didn't care about any of the offensive things he said, then there wouldn't be the fun of trolling. Exactly. Being
over the top, sexist, racist, heteronormative.
Right, exactly. So there's this back and forth, this give and take. One needs the other. The social justice warrior needs the troll, so they have something to feel offended over. The troll needs a social justice warrior, so they have someone to offend. It's like some circle of life bullshit.
Try up to make things clear. You're not even listening to me.
How would you describe Graham, MC Graham, at MC _ Graham on Twitter, your political beliefs, and in the quickest way you could? Political, religious, just.
Okay, religious beliefs. I would describe myself as a cultural pagan. Okay, so here's what I mean by that, and I've given this some thought. Cultural paganism is an alternative to what I consider to be cultural Christianity. Cultural Christianity is essentially what most, I think, atheists kind of enter into when they no longer formally believe in
supernatural God.
Right, yeah, and the Holy Spirit, any of that other nonsense, but they retain all the essential patterns of thought.
Well, just because I'm not a Christian doesn't mean I'm not a good person.
Oh man, and every time I hear someone say that, I think my life shortens by 15 to 20 minutes. And at this rate, I'll be
dead.
As
a left-hander, it probably does.
Yeah, and I'll be dead by the time I'm 35. So, as a cultural pagan, I try to look toward older shit, different stuff, less like universalist sort of belief systems. And this also comes from my reading of Max Stirner, the German nihilist, when he pointed out that, like, so you throw out Christianity and you get this God, this ghost named liberal humanism or whatever, you are adopting a new religion, one that will compel you to do stuff, one that can throw you in jail, send you overseas to fight in a war, take your fucking labor and all that stuff. So you're substituting one God for another, kind of like. So I think like, I want to try to avoid that trap as much as I avoid belief in the supernatural. I guess politically, on my Facebook, I describe myself as an anti-capitalist reactionary, and that is partially trolling. Part of what I'm doing is to sort of like point out that like a lot of the ideas that conservatives are allegedly, a lot of the institutions that conservatives are trying to preserve, like let's just take for example the nuclear family, are so devastated by their fealty to the free market, that if they would,
so their commitment to capitalism actually undermines their other alleged conservative values.
Exactly. So it's kind of like, and maybe if y'all would stop, with this whole like free trade, free market will fix it bullshit, you might preserve the aspects of American culture you allege to care about. It's like, and also reactionary, I think, kind of sort of indicates a certain outlook on life where like a lot of the big questions in history are not settled by who is morally right, who is morally wrong. They're just settled by just nasty sort of business that we take for granted because we're so comfortable, but have been, so the facts of existence laid bare are not very amenable to a lot of our delusions about freedom, justice, equality, whatever you want to call it. Like, for example, when Genghis Khan exploded out of the steppes and killed, they think, 40 fucking million people, and this was back when there weren't that many people, like there were far fewer people.
That was a much larger fraction of the human population
and
total.
Just came out and just put cities to the torch. Did anyone, did humanitarianism stop him?
Right.
No, nothing stopped him. He was so like, and also when our ancestors, came here, and there were already people living here, and we took the land from them, and we're not giving it back. Like, is there going to be any ultimate reckoning for that? No. There's no balancing act to history.
Yes.
A lot of people,
I think that's a good point.
like, they kind of like assume that, if you're a nasty person or you're a mean person, things are going to come back and kind of, there's going to be a bad end for you. And that is a fucking belief system for absolute plebs. Like, you have to believe in literal magic to think that's going to happen.
Right, because the course of history just hasn't been borne out that way.
Yeah. But there is, I think, something sort of positive about that, because like I was saying earlier, like, our wills are most strongly animated when nature is trying to kill us. I think we experience this positively in a lot of ways. It makes you feel alive. Having to struggle for existence can make you feel alive, and that when you don't have to do that, you just become kind of a lazy jerk off, and that is less pleasurable. So, even though life is nasty, brutish, short, etc., it can be,
it's also
exhilarating while it's nasty and terrible.
Seem worthwhile, at least in that respect.
Right, and then, thankfully, at the end, you just die, and your eyes close forever, and nothing happens. So,
that brings me to my religious views.
So let's hear them.
Okay. Atheist.
Okay, what does that mean?
Okay, it means, to me, and I can only speak for myself, it means I'm not a humanist.
Right.
I'm not an agnostic.
Right.
Not a cultural Christian. Right. I don't want to coexist.
Right.
I don't believe in any of your gods. Right. And I don't believe in things that don't exist without evidence. So morality, I don't really believe in that. Superstitions of any kind. Black cats, walking under ladders, Allah, any of that shit. I don't believe in that either. And miracles, none of that. So that's all it means. I think it's important, though, that I don't try to cop any kind of false humanism.
Right.
That's what annoys me most about other quote-unquote atheists. So, I'm not a good person.
Okay.
And, that's something I think a lot of atheists I've met go out of their way to prove or show that they're... Oh, the other thing they do is try to say... I'm just whining, but try to say that they are fulfilled, or they try to say that they have all the joys that religious people have, but without the religion.
Yeah.
And that's probably not true because they don't believe in magic, so they can't be enchanted in that way. And the other thing is, life sucks, so like you were previously talking about.
Yeah.
And so to pretend that it doesn't, and to say, like, no, atheists have fulfilling, wonderful lives and they make their own meaning, that's not true. Like, a lot of them are fucking miserable, because I've known them. I do know them. Like,
I am a miserable atheist.
Right. So if you are happy, there are happy atheists, and they're just, I don't know, into their hobbies or whatever. That's cool. But I'm not one of them. I am quite lacking in fulfillment.
Right. What would it take to make you fulfilled?
Just like decadence.
Right.
Really, liquor and ice cream and food and women, scantily clad women, of course.
So just kind of living like a Roman.
Yes, total hedonism.
Yeah.
Maybe I should change my religious views to hedonism. That might be more accurate.
Yeah. No, I think. I think.
Because here's what I think, right? Good things and pleasure feel good, and bad things and pain don't.
Right. So your objective is to get as much of the
good.
Yeah, and avoid at all costs.
Yes.
Yeah.
I could probably be doing better, but I'm doing the best that I've figured out so far.
All right. And so, how about your political beliefs? How would you describe this?
Direct action is what it says on my Facebook, and this means two things, right? One, you're only responsible for your actions. So, how I feel about the wars in Afghanistan or Libya or anywhere else doesn't really matter, because I can't stop them, and I'm not fighting them. Although, if I were to fight them, I'm responsible for choosing to fight them. So, you can only hold individuals responsible for their actions. So that's the first part. And the second part is that what you do actually does matter, right? Or it counts, even if only a couple of people notice it or whatever, which is why I do think there is value in activism. If you do sort of help to change other people's minds or change the tide or something like that. And I've seen it happen. It used to be popular to talk about how hippies or protesters were idiots and they were never going to change anything. That's not actually true. You do, over time, affect culture.
Yeah.
So it's also sort of a positive belief in the power of the individual. As lowly as they are.
Yeah, well, I mean, because the people that keep the system running, it's not like a ton of dudes. Any society, no matter how large, can be influenced, by a person. That you might not be that person, but it can be by
right.
And you don't know what's ultimately going to end up being the tipping point.
Right, and I think a lot of people are sort of. They don't have enough confidence in their personal ability to affect change, so they don't bother. I mean, a lot of people say, I heard it a lot in high school, I still hear it today sometimes, is, I'm not going to be able to change anything, so I don't care,
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, that's why the assholes are winning. I mean, bottom line.
But it gives you something to do, better than just sitting around todging off, you know what I mean? 24/7.
No, I don't know. Can you define todging off? For our American listeners.
I think it's, just jacking it,
Yes.
Choking the chicken. If I can be so bold as to demean an animal, through my speech. And
you can't. Can you
heteronormative patriarchal characterizations and descriptions.
Graham, your depiction of the animal and talking about your masturbation offends me. And because it offends me, that means something.
Right.
To you.
And it comes directly from my heart to you. I need something to change your mind.
And that's why you have to believe in one love.
Yeah,
and that the president of Ethiopia is literally God on earth. And that's why I'm changing my religious views to Rasta. And I'm going to grow dreadlocks. And when I finally get cancer, I'm going to refuse Western treatments. God bless you all.